Hello, welcome to this wrap-up edition of Week 14. I'm recapping how my fantasy football team did and my game picks from the previous week up against our special guests from last Thursday's episode. This show is called Go There on Fourth. It's a Christian podcast about faith, football, and fantasy. I'm Pastor Jason Barnett, a.k.a. the Dirt Path Pastor. That sounded bad. The Dirt Path Pastor. There, that's better. For the record, I'm not so much a football expert or a fantasy football expert. I'm just a junkie. And I'm just football hard knocks with you and sharing the journey with you. So with that being said, let's jump in and see how I did in the game picks for the Thursday night and early Sunday games. Coming in, I was 113-80 on the season, and I was 2-1 versus guests. Host of the My Seminary Life podcast was our guest, sharing a devotion with us, and he is attempting to take me down in these game picks. For Thursday night, it was the Raiders versus the Rams. I picked the Raiders to win because who would have believed Mayfield on 48 hours notice would come in and lead the Rams to victory. He didn't know the players' names. He didn't know the playbook. He didn't even know how to find the locker room at the end of the game. But what Baker Mayfield did know how to do was find in this game. So I picked the Raiders. I got this one wrong. However, Brandon got it right. He picked the Rams in this one. Jets versus the Bills. We both went with the Bills, and the Bills won this one. But all I will say is this: Mike White is one tough dude. I don't know if you saw the hit that he took in that Bills game. The Pat McAfee show highlighted it looked like he got speared by Bill Goldberg or some other wrestler, who's spear. It was perfect form. He sold it just as well as a pro wrestler would have done. Only Mike White wasn't really selling it. He was experiencing it for real. He had to go to the hospital after the game, and the dude's still practicing and attempting to play this week. So hopefully Mike White gets healed up. But, man, you are one tough guy. But anyway, we both picked the Bills to win. The Bills won that one. We picked the Bengals to win, and the Bengals won. Texans versus the Cowboys. We both picked the Cowboys to win, and the Cowboys won, and they kept it close. I've been very for the Cowboys. My son played on the Cowboys flag football team, and even then I couldn't bring myself to say the phrase "Go Cowboys." But something happened this week that may have changed my mind. That's they have picked up T.Y. Hilton long. One of the Colts legends at receivers, and I'm just so excited that he's back playing again. And even my hatred for the Cowboys is not enough to stop cheering for T.Y. So I may have actually found a reason to cheer for the Cowboys. A complication of which team am I going to cheer for in the playoffs, but we'll get to that. So we both picked the Cowboys, and the Cowboys won. Vikings, Lions. Brandon and I both went with the Lions to win this one, and the Lions won. And there was a funny moment, again, on the Pat McAfee show. I don't know if you saw it, where Dan Campbell was on the show earlier this week, and he talked about a mess up that he had. He was on the sideline, and he got distracted by the fans doing the wave, right? And like Peter, when he stepped out in the water, was walking in the water, and got Dave Campbell in the middle of a football game where Dan Campbell, where he's coaching, and he's the head coach of the Lions. He gets distracted by the wave, but only it's the fans this time. And his offensive coordinator gives him a play. And it turns out it's a play where they're throwing to an offensive lineman, and it just so happens to work out. That's how hot the Lions are right now, though. I would not want to play the Lions, but we both picked the Lions to win, and the Lions won. Jaguars. We both picked the Titans to win, and we both got this one wrong. Trevor Lawrence came in through for 360 yards, 3 touchdowns, and right now it just looks like the Titans are kind of going the wrong way. They fired their GM. Maybe they were winning at that point. They were playing pretty well, it seemed like, but maybe there's something going on there behind the scenes that we're all just not aware of, and now it's starting to show up on the field itself. So interesting. Eagles versus the Giants. We both picked the Eagles to win, and the Eagles won this one. Ravens versus the Steelers. We both – no, we didn't. We split this one. We went the same. I went with the Steelers. I thought the Steelers were at home. This is a good old-fashioned Steelers-Ravens slugfest. But I thought the Steelers had the advantage, mainly because Lamar Jackson is out with an injury. So I picked the Steelers. Brandon went with the Ravens. I did not anticipate Kenny Pickett getting hurt in this one. He got a concussion protocol. Mitch Trubisky came in and threw 3 interceptions. The Ravens' cause. So the Ravens won this one, although it was low scoring, just like I thought it would be, but the Ravens did just enough to win the game. So for the early games, I went 5-3. However, Brandon went 7-1. And so Brandon takes the early lead on me in the game pick. So he's trying to become the guest to beat me in that one. All right, so this segment, this show is called Go There on Fourth. It's a Christian podcast about faith, football, and fantasy football. And for the faith side of things, I always like to share a brief devotional. And this week, something interesting happened. Where we live at here on the Ravenna Nazarene compound here in Ravenna, Kentucky. My family, we live in the apartments above the fellowship hall. And so whenever I go down to go into the church, or I go down to go into my office, which is where I'm recording this from, I pass the fellowship hall back door. Well, as I'm going down yesterday, I noticed hanging on the back door that there is a yellow Dollar General plastic bag. And I did not want a Dollar General to pop up on the church property, because that's what happens, right? If you leave a Dollar General plastic bag sitting somewhere, it's going to grow a Dollar General store. And we didn't want that. I pulled it off the door, but I noticed there was something in the bag. And so I go in the fellowship hall, I open the bag, and inside is a banner. And it's a red banner. And I open it up, and on the red banner, it reads, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son. Whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Has that verse on there. And my question was, why was this bag hanging on the door, and why was it here? Now, the first thing maybe the first thing I should have done was, message people in the church and figure out who left it there, which I'll get to that in a minute. My mind went to the thought that this was another church that thought we Nazarenes needed to be saved. That there was something wrong with us Nazarenes, because if you know Nazarenes at all, we're a little bit rowdy. We love to eat, and we read from the NIV or other translations too. All right, but we do some things that are a little different from time to time. We believe that we just believe a little differently on some things. But the church knows this about us, thinks we're that church that needs to be saved, because we're not saved because we're Nazarenes. So they came and they dropped off this banner for us, so that way we would know the path to salvation and we could be saved. That I thought another church was trying to evangelize us. That was my reaction to this banner being there in the verse John 16 verse. And I just thought, man, if another church did that, took time to buy this banner, and this banner was not just like a cheap and made one. This was a well together banner. But I just thought, man, if another church was targeting us for being that church, that's just crazy. That's just out there. Why would they waste their time? Why would they waste their money coming to evangelize us when we're here in this community? Just absolutely ridiculous. Now, it turns out, after doing some research and asking about it, I learned that banner was actually bought by one of our church members, and they bought it to cover up an unfinished project that was happening around here on one of the walls. I like the banner. I'm excited about it. I think that this member that bought that had a great idea, was thinking ahead and trying to solve an issue for us, and I greatly appreciate that. But as I thought about that initial thought, even though it was wrong, right? It was wrong of me to have that thought. I should have done more investigating. But there is a lesson in that for us. Is so many times we think that someone doesn't belong to our church or go to our, or that they're not Christian enough, and somehow we have to evangelize them and save them from their fallacy of going to the other church down the street. And that's just wrong. We as Christians shouldn't have that mentality. We're not in competition with the other churches in town. Matter of fact, we're all working of Jesus Christ. We believe in the same Jesus. We believe that Jesus died on the cross for the forgiveness of our sins. So therefore, for us to be at war and odds with each other, even over doctrinal differences at times, is kind of silly. Oftentimes, the doctrinal differences that we have are maybe just but if you take away the wording and focus on the end result, we're saying the same thing. We're just saying it from two different perspectives. Now, again, I'm not saying that there are not heretical things out there. There's not things that are untrue that we need to speak out against. There are some things that are parading as Christian ideas and Christian thought that aren't Christian thought and aren't Christian ideas. They're very contrary to the nature of Jesus. And as Christians, we should stand up and speak out against those things. However, just because somebody goes to a different church from you does not mean that they're not a follower of the same Jesus that you do. And I think there's a good passage in Scripture that can kind of give us perspective on this too, and to not get sucked up into this idea of trying to evangelize other Christians, right? We're not called to evangelize other Christians. We're called to evangelize and to reach out, right? The people that are outside the faith. Then we're called to disciple our fellow Christians, brothers and sisters. We're called to walk with them, right? But we don't need to evangelize them because they've already been evangelized. They've already come to know Jesus. But anyway, the passage I want to share with you is from Mark chapter 7, verses 1 through 13. And this is how it reads. I'm going to read the whole thing, and then we'll kind of explain how it fits in. It says, the Pharisees gathered around him. They observed that some of his disciples were eating bread with unclean, that is, unwashed hands. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, keeping the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they have washed. And there are many other customs they have received, in pitchers, kettles, and dining couches. So the Pharisees and the scribes asked Jesus, why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders, instead of eating bread with ceremonially unclean hands? And Jesus answers them, Isaiah prophesies correctly about you hypocrites, as it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. They worship me in vain, teaching his doctrines, human commands. Abandoning the command of God, you hold on to human tradition. Jesus said to them, you have a fine way of invalidating God's command in order to set up your tradition. For Moses said, honor your father and mother, and whoever a father or mother must be put to death. But you say, if anyone tells his father or mother, whatever benefit you might have received from me is Corban, that is an offering devoted to God, you no longer let them do anything for his father or mother. You nullify the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down, and you do many other similar things. All right, so I know there's a lot of verses, there's a lot to get through, but let me break it down for you. So essentially the Pharisees and the scribes had this tradition that they washed everything, and including washing their hands before they sat down to eat, right? Because their thought was, if their hands are unclean, then whenever they their bodies are going to be unclean, and that therefore is going to make them internally unclean. They completely missed the point. That later on in this passage, Jesus is going to point that out. It's not what you put into your body that makes you unclean. It's what comes out of it. You and I start off as unclean, and that's why we need the Holy Spirit of God to come in and cleanse us. These rituals that they were following were supposed to be an outward sign of what God was doing on the inside, but instead they were doing the outward appearances without anything going on inside of them. And so the Pharisees, they're appalled that Jesus' disciples will not wash their hands or won't follow these traditions as they're coming in, right? They were different. They were obviously following a teacher of God, even if they didn't believe Jesus was the Messiah, which the Pharisees don't. But instead, they are lashing out against it because Jesus is teaching and leading his disciples differently than they had always taught and believed. That about concern. And if you really look into the way the Pharisees worshipped and practiced their faith at this point, they had actually 600 and something extra laws on top of the 10 Commandments. And these laws, they thought that their thought was, if we had these other laws here, if we adhere to these other 600 and something, then we would be less likely to break one of the other 10, right? But the problem became, as breaking the 10 Commandments, the original 10, that that's sin, that goes against the law of God, right? That's God's law handed down. But they were trying to protect themselves from breaking the 10 Commandments. They started prescribing these other 600 laws too, meant to keep you from. But soon, if you break one of those, they were man-made. But if you were to go to the Pharisees and you would ask them how important these 600 laws were, because it was their tradition to follow it and adhere to it, they would have believed all 600 of them were important. Now, if you asked the different Pharisees, they probably would have put them in different orders and things like that. But in the end, they would all probably agree that you had to follow all 600 of them. And Jesus points out their hypocrisy, because here they are following all these rituals and all these laws. But one of the things that had become a tradition was actually something that was going against. And here they are, they're pointing out that they're harping on Jesus and his disciples for not following their tradition of washing their hands before they eat. They're following a tradition that goes against God's law, which was, right, we know God's law tells us to honor your father and mother. However, let's say, their father and mother, these Pharisees, their father and mother were struggling financially, and they needed assistance. They needed care. Well, their son, if they say, well, actually, what I was going to give to help my parents, if I offer that to God, then it belongs to God. Then I no longer have to give it to my parents. I no longer have to use that what's set aside to take care for their care or to help them out. Mother and father with their gifts, they were using it and setting aside, claiming it as an offering to God. Now, from the outside looking in, that was like, well, they gave it to God, right? True. But in the end, what does God want more? Would he rather us honor our father and mother and help them out in their time of need, or would he rather us give to the church? See, in the end, God would rather us honor our mother. Yes, it's important. Needs financial gifts in order to sustain and do the work that God's called us to do. However, not at the cost of what God's already called us to do and at the cost of those we're responsible for. And so that's where the Pharisees were wrong, and Jesus rebukes them for that. Hypocrisy. All right, so what am I getting at this? How does this tie into our little devotional thought? Well, first off, sheep stealing is not a healthy way to grow the church. If your method of trying to grow your church is going to other churches and calling them out for their failures, that's not a healthy way to do it. Because all that's going to happen is you might pry a few away from the other church to come to your church, but at some point, laws and hypocrisy in your church, and they're going to call you out for it, and they're going to either that or they're going to leave over it. Usually the sheep that you steal away because of those things are not necessarily the healthiest sheep to begin with. Way to grow a church. Another thing is sheep labeling is not a healthy activity for the church. If your church is going around pointing out all the flaws of the other church in town, all that is proof that your church is unhealthy. All it proves is that on the things that God wants you to be focused on, and that's growing his kingdom. If you were focused on growing God's kingdom, you wouldn't have time to go point out all the flaws of the churches around you. And believe me, even in Estill County, Kentucky, there are so many people in the need of the message of Jesus. There is more than enough work for all the churches that are in this area that if we were to stop focusing on battling each other and focus on the needs at hand, focusing on reaching into the lives, offering the healing of Jesus, we wouldn't have time to bicker with each other. We don't have time to point fingers. All we would have time to do is do the work and then come together to figure out how to do the work more effectively together. Well, if you enjoyed that devotional, I know I got a little excited there. I encourage you to visit the Ravenna Church of the Nazarene. That's where I'm the pastor at. You can learn more about us at ravnaz.com. You can find my weekly sermons there, more about what we believe. To have you if you live in the area. We'd love for you to join us on a Sunday morning. Our service starts at 11 a.m. Eastern time. If you live too far away, but you still want to join us, our services are live streamed at 11 a.m. on our church. Or you can catch them whenever you want to, either on our church Facebook page, the Dirt Path channel on YouTube, or you could also check out the Dirt Path Sermon Podcast available on all your favorite podcast app, which is my weekly sermon uploaded in podcast form. All right, let's continue our recap of the Sunday games. Like I said, coming out of the early ones, Brandon it was sitting at 7-1, while I was 5-3. And let's see if I can catch him in these afternoon games. Let's see if I did. And I'm just going to be honest, I'm up front with you. I did not. But the first game was the Chiefs versus the Broncos. We both picked the Chiefs to win, and the Chiefs won. It was a little closer than I expected it to be. But did anyone else see that Mahomes touchdown pass, the one where he's just kind of running toward the sideline and kind of no look, flicks it over to the defender, and the receiver, McKinnon catches it, and the running back catches it and runs it in for a touchdown? That was an incredible play. That was just, if a high school kid had tried that, they would have tried to flick it. They would have probably pitched it to the defender in front of them, or worse, flicked it over that guy's head right to the other guy hiding behind him or out of bounds. And then they would have gone to the sideline, got benched, and not played the rest of the game. But Mahomes is Mahomes, and he did it, and it worked, and got away with it. So incredible. But we both picked the Chiefs to win, and the Chiefs won. This one here, Brandon and I split ways. It was the Buccaneers versus the 49ers. I thought, man, the Buccaneers have a lot to play for. They're trying to win that division, which nobody seems to want to win. Brandon went with the 49ers, which was probably the smarter pick in hindsight. The 49ers defense offense has been underperforming all season long, or maybe that's who they've been all along. It's just the expectations were higher than they should have been. But either way, I will say this: Tom Brady looked old in this game, and the reason I say that was they weren't high and past the receiver. They weren't throwing hard out in front of them where they couldn't get to it. Most of the passes that Brady missed on were underthrows. And to me, as a casual observer of the game, to me, it just looks like the arm strength isn't quite there. It's not quite where it was at the beginning of the season. At least it's not consistently there. So I think Brady's looked old, and the 49ers looked really good. And to be honest with you, I know there's a lot of rumors about Brady that is probably going to go sign someplace else next season. And I guess in the end, I wouldn't be shocked. But at the same time, too, I don't think so. Again, I think Tom Brady, this is kind of his last hurrah. Before, as you can tell from what's happening on this podcast weekly. All right, Panthers versus the Seahawks. Oh, but anyway, Brandon got that one right. I did not. Panthers versus the Seahawks. We both picked the Seahawks to win. The Panthers have not played well. They're on the interim coach. They let Baker Mayfield go because he wasn't playing very well. They've had the carousel quarterback thing going on all season. But man, the Seahawks just didn't have a good game. Geno threw 2 interceptions. I watched this one. They just did not look very good in this one. Just maybe it was an off week, dealing with some injuries at the running back spot. He's on defense too. Not entirely sure, but Panthers got the win. So we both got this one wrong. So in the afternoon games, the late afternoon games, I went 1-2. Brandon went 2-1. So I'm at 6-5 for the week, and Brandon is at 9-2. So I'm here to win by the end of the Sunday afternoon games. So Brandon, congratulations! You are the second guest to come on the podcast and beat me in the game picks, and we haven't even got to the primetime picks yet. All right, how did my fantasy? When we last talked on Thursday, I let you know that this was our last regular season game before the playoffs started. I had to win, and I had to get a little bit of help to make the playoffs. So I told you who my team was, who I was going to start, and what my hopes were. I remember I'm in a 12-team PPR league with custom scoring with church folks and friends. We have some extra points for targets, completions, on top of your point for reception. Okay. I'm 5-8, and again, I was fighting for a playoff spot. I had a slim shot at the number 6, although did not help me out. If they had beaten the number 6 seed, I would have had a shot at the 6 seed, but he did not even try. So that guy won. My fight came down for the 7th seed, and I was battling 2 other teams. One had beaten me, and I think I had beaten the other one. I can't remember exactly, or maybe I'd lost to both of them. Considering my team started off 1-6, and the fact that I was at 5-8 with even a hope for the playoffs, miracles happen. So for those of you who play fantasy football, maybe you had a rough year this year. Don't ever give up on your team. Don't quit. All right, just keep. And even at the worst case, and you try your hardest and you don't make it playoffs, and at least you've made it more difficult and you have more fun, and you made it more competitive for the people you're against. Right. That's what makes a good fantasy football league. A good fantasy football league is when 7, 9, 11 other people in your league that are competing week in, week out, giving it their best, making you try, making you work after it. That's what makes fantasy football fun. That's what makes leagues fun. Anyway, so who was my team this week? So I remember Smith at quarterback, and like I said, he was against the Panthers. He had a rough week. He did throw for 264 yards and 3 touchdowns, even though he was sacked 3 times and had 2 interceptions. He finished that game with 63.4 points, which was pretty decent for the quarterback position. I was hoping for more. I probably would have had more if he hadn't thrown the interception, but give the Panthers some defensive scheme going. Running back 1, I had Austin Eckler versus the Dolphins. He had 140 yards, scrimmage yards, and a touchdown, which was 40.2 points for me. So I was pretty excited about that. Running back 2 was Jamal Williams. That first game against the Vikings, he had a pretty solid game. This time, Jamal Williams only had 19.8 points, which is a decent, okay. But this was Williams' first game. Now I notice he is splitting more carries with Swift. He's splitting more carries with Jackson. Is that a trend to be concerned about moving forward? I hope not, because I don't know that I would be in the playoffs right now if it wasn't for Jamal Williams. But I do think it's time. Maybe I should at least have a plan for running back. The Chargers, I was concerned because of the Chargers defense. Also, Hill was kind of listed as questionable early in the week, but he ended up playing, although he was playing with a bum ankle that really was nagging him the whole game. But he still finished with 6 catches, 81 yards, and a touchdown. But now he is questionable for this week. But thankfully, he got last game. But his questionable status for this week is something I will have to monitor moving forward. Receiver 2, Keenan Allen versus the Dolphins. There was a little concern heading in this one. I didn't highlight this Thursday, but Mike Williams was. How would that affect Keenan Allen's targets, in the game? And actually, in the end, I think it helped because Keenan Allen had 12 catches for 92 yards. He didn't have a touchdown, but 12 catches is amazing. It's a great outing. He finished with 22.6 points. So great output from Race. This is probably the best week I've had almost all season. So I was pretty happy with that. Tight end, Dalton Schultz versus the Texans. I was concerned because the Texans have played tight ends pretty tough all season long. But then again, it's the Texans, right? Yeah, pretty much if you have someone on your team playing the Texans on offense, you're going to try and win the game. And so I left Schultz in. Catches 87 yards for 15.7 points. That's pretty good for tight end this year. Really this year, if you can find a tight end that's going to score you double digits, you've done a pretty good job. And so Schultz came through for me. At flex, I went with James Conner. And again, I was concerned because he's going against that Patriots defense. They were ranked 5th against opposing running backs. But Conner, because of the volume of touches he gets, he came out with 114 scrimmage yards off of 21, had a touchdown. So that was 39.1 points. So I got, essentially 40 points from both my running backs. So that's a really good game. Defense was my big boneheaded dumb mistake of the week. I should have paid more attention to the matchup, Buccaneers versus the 49ers, but I was so focused on who the quarterback was. I didn't think about the blocking scheme and the running game for the 49ers enough. And I only came away with 4 points from the Buccaneers defense. I'm happy to come away with 4 points as poorly as they played. The fact that I scored positive points-wise was a miracle. It was about as bad as you could be for a fantasy defense. So, kicker, I had Badgley from the Lions. He went 2 for 3 on field goals, 4 for 4 extra points for 11 points. So, again, anytime your kicker scores your double digits, that is a good thing. So, in the end, though, I did my part. I got the W, winning 240.9 to 170.3. Hey, and the crazy thing is I won my final 2 games of the season against the two of the best teams in the league. Wow. I was tied with 2 other squads for final playoff spot. Then they both lost, which had they both won, I still could have gotten in, but it would have come down to points because the tiebreaker in our league was based on points, not head-to-head wins, based on points. And I ended both of them, so I still would have been fine even if that was a scenario, but I would have been sweating it a lot more. But the good news is I made the playoffs, which means there are 2 more episodes, right? So we'll have Week 15, Round 1 of the playoffs. And unfortunately, I am playing the number 2 seed, right? I'm playing the number 2 seed who was the long-time number 1 team in the league all year in our power rankings, all season long. The reason that he is struggling right now is his team's been bitten by the injury bug a little bit. And the week I played him, Lamar Jackson went out in the first the best matchup, but that's what happens when you're the number 7 seed and you're playing the number 2. Number one seed in our league gets a bye. But there is hope, right? I won the last meeting and been the best my team's played all season, and then we saved it for late in the year. Maybe, just maybe, I can get a win, but we'll see how it goes. I'll be back with you tomorrow to share with you what my plan is, and we'll have a special member here at our church. Love Jeff to death. Loves football. He's actually in this league with us, so I'm sure he'll share with his team struggle. And boy, he's had some struggles. He doesn't have the same running backs on his team that he started the year with. But we'll get back to that later. So picks for primetime. How did I do in the picks for primetime? How did Brandon do? Dolphins versus the Chargers. We both went with the Dolphins in this one. But let's just say my Dolphins very, very good. Okay, they looked probably the best, in my opinion, that they have all season with Mike Williams in the lineup, and that's kind of so we both got that one wrong. Patriots versus the Cardinals. Brandon and I split on this one. He went with the Cardinals. I went with the Patriots, and the Patriots got the win. The Pats defense is good. I'm not sure. I'm still not sure what's going on with the Patriots offense. Mac Jones looked okay in this one, but then again, who knows with the Patriots offense moving forward. So I went 1-1 in prime time. Brandon went 0-2, but I was at 7-6 on the weekend. Brandon was at 9-4. So again, congratulations to Brandon. I'm now 2-2 against guest. He's the winner circle that includes my wife Nicole, who was on here earlier this season. So congratulations for entering the winner circle, Brandon. I really appreciate you being on the show last Thursday. My game picks for the season, I'm at 120 correct and 86 incorrect. So maybe I can improve on that here in week 15. Please do me a favor, subscribe to this podcast. Please consider leaving me a review. Even if you think the show's terrible, leave me a review. It helps. And share this podcast with somebody you know. And be sure to check out my other podcast, the Dirt Pastorman podcast. It's available also on all the podcasting apps. It's my weekly sermon uploaded. And also be sure to follow me on TikTok, where I post daily videos and daily devotional videos. Well, until next time, happy football and fantasy football.